Excuse me, we don't have enough steps to read the Bible, so we're not
Okay, thank you. We're set? We're ready? I guess in my coffee-addled mind, I'm impatient, so maybe we can start, and if there's more people who show up, then they show up. Come on.
This way?
Sure.
This is the only door.
There's only one choice.
What do I do?
So thank you for showing up.
You're welcome.
Well, there's always a comedian. So we feely happy feely band of brothers. So I did not get a choice in this time slot, so we make do what we have with it. Feel free to take pictures. I don't mind if you take pictures. I'm used to beautiful women wanting to take my picture, but you don't have to. The link is right there. You can go to my website, download the whole PPT. If you don't remember that link, it's in the book. So I made sure that that link is included in my profile in your KOTESOL book. So yeah, what else? I've been waiting the weekend to do this and thinking, well, all of the ways that I'm going to screw it up. And I'm not sure how long this is going to take, whether it's going to be too fast or too slow. I have 38 slides. It will hopefully not be too painful. And if I start running out of time, then I have to start talking faster, like the guy in the commercial who tells you about possible side effects. And if we have too much time, we'll think of something. I'll play a song or something. But we'll see how it goes. All right, well, why is an English professor here, and should literature be taught? Now that I think about it, maybe that title was a mistake. It sounds arrogant. And I was worried about a lynch mob being here today, with some of you saying, oh, well, so you're a professor and we're not. Is that what you're saying? And why don't you go peddle your paper on Jane Austen somewhere else? Okay, well, I want to assure you it's not an ego thing. Like Camilla Paglia says, I'm not above a fart joke. I do try to be in touch with the young people of today. I even have a Black Eyed Peas CD. So, it's not that. I also wanted to sex the topic up somehow so that I would get people to come here at 4 o'clock. So that's my excuse. Hopefully it did make you curious about what I'm going to say. So, well, who's this guy with his terrible dad jokes? What's he doing here? I teach in the English Language and Culture program at Hanyang University in Ansan at their Erica campus. And as you can see by now, I'm an imposter. I have no TEFL qualifications. I did my doctorate in Chaucer at UNLV, of all places. I had the unbelievable luck of having an Oxford Chaucerian to supervise my dissertation. I did my master's in Newfoundland and my BA in Edmonton, Canada, which is where I'm from. I've been here and there in Korea over about 10 years. I did a Hagwon job in Busan. I did some teacher retraining near Jeochewan, Cheongju. Then after my doctorate, I worked in Daegu in English, in an international relations college, which is where I know Rob Dickey from. And you can see here what I teach. I teach some literature survey courses. I teach modernism, postmodernism. I did a Shakespeare course, a graduate writing semester. I've only been in this job for 2 years. I'm still getting the feel of it. And publications, important, wonderful things my department is doing, blah, blah, blah. So let's get on with it. You can see my CV online if you want to have the gory details. Well, for your dining and dancing pleasure, we are going to, well, first I'm going to, if I divide this into a hamburger, the bun is that I'm going to defend why I'm here to begin with. Then I'm going to explain why you should teach literature, why should students learn it, how to set it up is, I hope, the meat, or at least the lower level patty of what we're going to do today. And then we'll have some questions. Okay, so why am I here? I have to admit I have a love-hate relationship with KOTESOL. Some of the sessions I go to, I think, why am I here? I don't care about the difference between TEFL and TSL. I don't want to fight the acronym wars. Sometimes I have an ethical problem with the commercial presentations. But I do have to say, most of all, I like being here. I like seeing what people are doing, and it's relevant to what I do. I think this is a wonderful resource. Okay, yesterday there was a great talk given on content-based instruction, and now I feel intimidated by what he's done. All last night I was trying to imitate a Scottish accent, but I'm just going to give that up and move on. Where else am I going to go anyway? There's just not many people teaching English literature in Korea who are foreigners. My coworkers in my program are lovely people. I like them a lot. They're sweet guys. They're all Koreans. I'm the only one I know who does this. And if we were to have an English language foreigners conference in Korea, it could probably be held in a Norabong. So one of the reasons I'm here is that I get lonesome. ELAC, English Language and Literature Association of Korea, I don't know why it didn't come down to the end. That's another conference for English literature you might be interested in. Most of their sessions are in Korean, but some are English, so there is that opportunity. Okay, well, when I worked in Gamyang, the administration had a certain amount of condescension towards the English instructors that they did not have for the subject instructors. And by a certain amount of condescension, I mean it like the Atlantic Ocean has a certain amount of water. So, this was my frustration in my last job, that the subject professors teaching sociology, history, Russian philosophy, whatever in English language, were certainly seen differently from the English people. And one of my fruitless efforts at that university was trying to convince my colleagues that we had a great deal in common. Every educator at some level, by teaching in English, teaches English. There is some overlapping whether people want to admit it or not. This is additionally so when you get into English. I know this print is small, but you can look at it later, deal with it. English as an academic discipline is a pretty big tent. When you tell people you teach English, what do you mean? Well, it could be English literature. I'm in a very small field of medieval studies. Most of my work is in the 13th century. English literature could be divided by period or subject: criticism, drama, feminist, Marxist, deconstructionist, readings, creative writing, composition and rhetoric, theories of persuasion, argumentation, writing theory, linguistics, applied linguistics, and EFL, ESL. I'm using these terms broadly. So, well, I made this clever little diagram here to show that we have a lot in common. And rather than seeing our disciplines as different, I'd rather you see them as connecting and intersecting, or as growing organically from one subfield or discipline to another. We get pure language instruction here, much more process-oriented, heading towards the emphasis on content, with branches going into literature, composition, linguistics, pedagogy. Okay, so that says why I'm here. It doesn't really say why you should listen to me. What is in it for you? Again, I think we're all in the same boat. Also, as far as you are concerned, I think these are two possible avenues you might be interested in from a career perspective. What can you do as a job knowing or being able to teach some English literature? Well, one is that you become an English literature professor, where you teach literature all day and you lie on the grass and you think about Milton, and or you write papers. That's one branch you can go in. The other is that you use English literature as a content subject in your language acquisition classes at whatever level. And I'll talk about the fine points in a moment here. The first thing I'm talking about is really career. Why should you teach English? When I first came here to Korea in 2003, it really was true. You needed a degree and a pulse. And when I stepped off the airplane, I had 2 job offers at the airport. It's not like that now, and in fact the wages haven't really improved much for Hagwon teaching since 2003. If we're following the trends happening in Japan, Hagwon teaching is in decline. And I honestly think conversation instruction is also in a slow decline, because the native level of instruction in the public schools is improving. Maybe not as quickly as the Koreans claim it is, but it is improving. The native speakers are getting better at teaching the students before they get to the college level. So what are some possible growth points if you do want to stay in Korea? Well, all of these fields, Hagwon teaching, they're not going to go away. But I do think that if you want to augment yourself or give yourself special value in job seeking, I'd be thinking about literature courses, mandatory freshman survey writing. Let me try that again. This is pretty much a staple in North American universities. At the freshman level, you might do a mandatory survey literature course. You might do 1 or 2 mandatory writing courses. I expect that to come here sooner or later. And here is where the KOTESOL lobby gets mad at me with their fast cars and loose women. But honestly, I look at these MA TESOL degrees and I think there is a danger when everybody has one. I would recommend that people look at doing composition and rhetoric programs to be specialists in writing instruction, and possibly combined or chained with a literature component. I really think that is going to be a saleable qualification in the coming years. Okay, well, so that's why you should teach literature. Well, what about the students reading literature? This is the problem. Getting them to read the damn book. And I have these Clockwork Orange fantasies where I wish I could tie them down and make them read the bloody text. And it still wouldn't work. They would find a way to play on their smartphone while their eyes are chained open. So it really is a struggle to make the students read. Koreans just don't do a lot of discretionary reading. They are studious. If this survey is to be believed, they just don't do a great amount of reading for pleasure. I talk to my students about reading for fun, and they look at me like, well, what, like doing taxes for fun? Like washing the dishes for fun? I have the odd student, and this is like music when it happens, who writes me an email at the end of the summer, "Dear Dr. Eckert, I was reading this over the summer." That's wonderful. That really does make my job worthwhile, but they are exceptions. Having said that, I think there's still reasons to do it. Sometimes I feel like Frasier. If you remember the episode of Cheers where he begins to read Charles Dickens and no one is listening, it's not always like that. So, why should students learn literature? Now I sound like Red from that 70s show. I'm dropping a lot of cultural references. School is not always fun. If school was always fun, you would have to come up with another word for school not being fun, like skippity-doo. These are not democracies. Sometimes you make students do things which are good for them they don't particularly want. Having said that, sometimes I think the students do enjoy being forced to read literature. Because what is the alternative? Content. Sometimes it's just useful to have content in your class other than the same lame textbook dialogues about what you're going to do this weekend, or the same boring presentations about what's the best career or when's the best time to get married. So sometimes just as an alternative to those staler tropes, I think the students do enjoy doing the literature. I think it helps them. It helps them, okay, there's my mistake, which some of you caught. Understanding the literature, I think it improves critical thinking. It improves problem-solving skills. I'll get to that a little more. I'll talk about when they try to cheat and use translations in a few minutes. I don't think it's the end of the world. What's my major point in this? The text fell off the slide a little bit. I think some of the students really like it. And part of the problem, part of the reason I had to fight with them to read, is that I wasn't necessarily choosing the right texts. And I think getting a little better at knowing what they want to read has made the classes more successful and made the students more motivated. So now I think I want to switch gears a bit into how do you do this? How to set it up. I think the first question, and maybe the most crucial question, is do your employers have your back? Do your employers support you doing this? In my present job, I'm an English literature, it's what I have to do, it's what I'm supposed to be doing. In my previous job, I really had very little backing for teaching literature. I tried teaching it in a summer course once, and I got a scolding from my associate dean saying, "Why would students want to read literature? Literature is boring." Well, thanks. Thank you for validating what I spent 12 years in university studying. I realize that your foreign policy and Euro study course is important, but mine is just a game that I should play with a Nerf ball. Sometimes your university will not support you. And the reason you need support is that at least initially you need a little coercion. If you're going to mandate students read and read at home, you need some leverage to make them do it. If you have the sort of class design where you simply can't fail people or you just don't have much control over the curriculum, it's not going to work. You need to be able to, I'm looking for a softer word than coerce, but you need a little bit of a way to nudge the students to do it. It also needs to be doable within your course structure. Does it fit into the goals of what you're doing in your courses? Do the students have the English fluency for it? Can they handle the texts that you are giving them? And I will talk about that again. I keep saying I'm going to talk about everything, but I really am. I'm going to talk about different scenarios of fluency levels or motivation levels. But in short, I think that's a fairly obvious question. Can the students do it? Okay, so 3 possible scenarios. One is high-level fluency. So if you are fortunate enough to have students who want to be there, who want to do it, who are English majors or have some other disciplinary interest to be there, you can do novel-length works. I do about 3 or 4 a semester in a typical undergraduate class. My first year, 2 years ago, I got greedy. I said, well, in a typical English literature class in Canada, would do 12 novels a semester. And I thought, maybe we can do 6. No, we can't. Impossible. Then I went down to 5. No, didn't work. 3 or 4 seems to be the sweet spot for me, for literature majors. The courses are designed by concept. So right now I'm teaching a modernism course, British modernism. So I did a postmodern class last semester. Most of the work I do is British because there's another fellow in the department who does American literature. Or you might organize by genre or time period. I did Shakespeare last semester. You could do dramas, short stories, whatever, or a time period. What are my classes, what do I do in my classes? They are fairly lecture-oriented because there's a lot of content. They have to understand some difficult ideas. I go fairly light on the literary theory. I mean, I do formalist readings, plot, narrative, themes, similes, imagery, metaphor. I get into some of the higher theory. I explain ideas of modernism. Maybe we can do some new historical readings or critical readings. We might do discuss biographical influences from the author. We might even be able to look at religious allegories or political allegories. I can't really throw deconstructionism at them. I can't give them Barthes. I don't understand Barthes. Some things like queer studies just aren't going to fly in a Korean classroom. Again, 3-4 works a semester works. You don't need to see this, and it's quite small. This is the lesson plan for the course I'm teaching right now in modernism, where I give some historical lecture days. Dubliners, Brave New World, Lord of the Flies, Lucky Jim. British humor novel from the 1950s. And then the last month is really an intensive writing seminar. Because to me, really the meat of the course is that they are able to communicate the ideas that they discuss in the novels in a longer research paper. A lot of stuff. It looks more impressive than it is because you write these things and then you end up changing them always.
Is it twice a week class?
Yes.
Two an hour and a half each?
Yes.
And the kids get 3 credits for it?
Yes. Yes. It does work. Again, it looks more impressive than it really is. What sort of activities and evaluations do? I don't do a midterm. I do a final. I do an extensive research paper project at the end. They do it in 2 drafts. I do a lot of website blog responses where they write something on the blog and they just give their opinion. They do some free writing on the novel. I like the novel, it sucks, I don't understand it, or I like this character, or I'm interested in this idea. I give them about 10 prompts. They do a bit of free writing, but they like that. And we do a presentation project during the course where the group will analyze or answer a question about one of the novels that they choose. I let them choose. It's natural that they're going to like one text more than another, and that's fine. I would be the same. And unfortunately, I do reading quizzes. My first semester, I just trusted them that they would read, and they didn't do it. And now I have to give them surprise quizzes once in a while. Unfortunately, there has to be a few sticks and a few carrots. And yes, there is a little theory in my presentation. I only pulled 90% of it out of my bum, and so there is a little bit of bloom in here. I tried to design the courses so that overall the level of theoretical complexity rises throughout the semester. At the beginning of the course, and the quiz questions are going to be very knowledge-based. Why does Ophelia drown? Why does the character do this? Why does Jack take over the... Things like that. But I mean, knowledge level. My cat can understand knowledge level issues. My cat understands understanding level thinking. When the sun goes down, it's time to feed her. It's the higher level thinking that really gets interesting towards later in the semester. And that's what I look for by the time they're getting to their paper projects. For example, again, I know this is small. Example of Araby from James Joyce. Simple questions on the quizzes or in early assignments. Why does he go to the fair? Who is the boy in love with? And then later on, how does the narrative relate to other stories in Dubliners? Does the text do political or allegorical readings work? Does the story symbolize something? What does it symbolize? Sometimes you can get that far and sometimes you can't. So, I mean, this is the best case scenario. You get as far as you can get. Yeah, so here's a presentation. Here's one on Macbeth the students did. Here's another one on Lord of the Flies. So they do it. They do some very nice presentation work in the class. Again, I let them choose their own topics from a list so that they do some analysis or evaluation of the text. I don't simply want a description of the characters. I do admit they do some really cool things. They come up with some fun ideas. Again, there's a danger, as with any presentation, that they will download some junk from Wikipedia they don't understand, and they will just mumble the answer. But that can happen in any course with any subject. I do spend a few days teaching them how to make presentations, better presentations. Okay, choosing the literature. What works? Well, I should give you some concrete things, like what novels work in my experience. Dubliners, they love it. I was shocked. Dubliners? They love it. Well, his first work, Dubliners, is not stream of consciousness, 10 pages of the bologna sandwich I ate. The first novel does have these compressed little stories. And why do they like it? Because Dublin, oppressed colonial city, they get it. They get the analogy between Dublin as an oppressed colony and Korea in roughly the same time period. They seem to identify with the stories. Short, dramatic stories, strong emotions, love, survival, success, murder. The Great Gatsby, love story, they like it a lot. And I thought, okay, you just like it because of the movie. But no, I mean, they wrote papers on it. I gave them quizzes where I was mean and evil, and I deliberately chose questions that were not in the movie. They seem to really like that. Dorian Gray, scary gothic horror, they ate it up. The Remains of the Day, I was skeptical because it's a very thinky, philosophical book. It's written by a Japanese author. I expected half the students to say we hate him because he's Japanese. No, they like the story. Bridget Jones' Diary, enjoyable love story. Meh. Brave New World, also fairly thinky, difficult story. They don't really get the satire part. When I point out scenes where I think the story is very funny, they don't get it. They really respond more to the base issues of the narrative. It's an interesting book to teach because Westerners tend to be scared of the coercive part of Brave New World. And the Koreans not so much. They really think more about the sexual promiscuity and the morality of the novel. Lucky Jim, not bad. It's a funny story. They like it because it's set on a campus and the main character is an alcoholic. White Teeth is only about 10 years old. Funny story. Hard Times, the English is hard. Language becomes a problem once you get back more than about 100, 150 years. Dubliners is not a problem, but once you get to Dickens and especially Austen, language is an issue. What about the misses? Pride and Prejudice, again, I have a feeling they just liked it because they were reading easy English versions or watching the movies. I don't have a feeling that they read it. And it is difficult. Grapes of Wrath, a lot of 1930s American slang. My heart was broken. I'm a Chaucerian. They hated Chaucer. And it's not language. I wrote a translation for them. I gave them The Miller's Tale, nice filthy story. I gave them The Wife of Bath's Tale. They hated it. They thought it was just dirty for no reason. They didn't understand the values or the concepts in the stories. Hitchhiker's Guide, my heart was broken again. they did not respond to culturally specific humor. 42, why is that funny? That's dumb. I explained it to them and just crickets. They just sat there, salon dumb. They hated Hitchhiker's Guide. C.S. Lewis, I taught, I am a Christian. I thought, well, modernism is fairly religiously skeptical, and Lewis does write fiction where he takes into account some of the modernist features or tropes. And I think it's a good story. It's sort of a dream vision. The Great Divorce was the novel. The students hated it. I could tell because they all skipped the day of the... They all skipped my lectures on those days. Nobody wanted the presentation. Nobody wrote papers on it. Stephen Leacock, I gave them some short stories from Canada. They hated it. Those were misses. In short, love works, comedy doesn't. At least British comedy doesn't. I showed them a few movie clips. Why is this funny? Why are these knights scared of this rabbit? Monty Python did not work. Strangely enough, they love Shakespeare. And they love Harry Potter. They like Shakespeare a lot. I couldn't really figure out why. Why do they like Shakespeare so much? Well, language was not an obstacle, ironically, because I gave them facing text versions, the No Fear Shakespeare. So they have the original on one side and the translation on the right side. I did allow them to use any language they want. And I think they like Shakespeare partly because of the cachet. They could go home and tell their parents, we read Shakespeare. So they do like telling their friends that they did Shakespeare. Also, I think strong emotions and strong plots. Although Shakespeare is a little intimidating, really the plots are quite simple. The king wants to pass on his kingdom. The young man comes home and his father's dead. The man wants to be king. The man wants to get married. They are simple plots. Harry Potter, I think they like Harry Potter because it's current. They've already read it. They've already seen the movies. It's in their time period. They like Harry Potter. They don't really get the comedy so much, but they like the stories. I've tried to impress on the students that the movies really don't get the funniness of Harry Potter across. Rowling, to me, has a sort of dry wit like Jane Austen does. Some of them get it when reading it and some don't. But anyway, these have gone over very well. Won't they cheat and just watch the movie or read the Korean version? Well, I mean, sometimes I cut my losses. I mean, with Jane Austen, they just couldn't understand it. I have trouble with Austen. I can read Old English. I have trouble with Austen because she has these sentences this long and these complex subordinate sentences. They're difficult. So I had to bend a little on some of these novels and let them use other versions. Having said that, how do I make sure they don't only look at the movie? Well, as I said, I gear the quizzes because the movies never have everything. The movies have to leave out material. Also, when they do presentations and when they write papers, I mandate that they must use the original English. So at least the things that they write their paper on or presentation, they are in English. Even if they're just cross-referencing from dual language versions. But that's fine. They're thinking and they're communicating to me in English. That's the important part to me. And if they do a bit of legwork in Korean, that's fine. Okay, well, this is what I'm scared of. This is what I'm scared of. Bridget Jones' Diary. I assigned it last winter and thought, oh yeah, I've seen the movie, the book should be fine. Then I read the book, oh my God. There's about 20 blowjob jokes in the book. The same thing with White Teeth. I assign White Teeth and then I read it just before class starts. I don't remember this from graduate school. There's an entire chapter where the main character has a masturbation addiction. Lovely. Some of these books I kind of worried about that the students would get angry or tell their parents. Again, your administration has to have your back. They need to know what you're doing. I talked to my colleagues and they said, well, you have to teach it. You're not telling them to do these things. You're talking about the literature. You're discussing it. And I have to say the students were very good about it. They didn't talk about the dirty parts in class. They knew they were there and they let it go. They were very good about avoiding that awkwardness. I still probably won't do white teeth again, but Bridget Jones, doable. But I do want you to think about it. Trigger warnings are controversial in the States. I know there is a real resistance to letting mommy's precious snowflake dictate the books that are taught. I don't let the students choose the texts, but I do tell them in advance, okay, this story is going to be a little racy. Medium level fluency. Okay, well, gradually I'm getting there. How about when we get to students who are not quite so strong? Okay, then you have to think about, can you actually assign the texts? Are the students willing to buy texts? If you use public domain versions, that's a way around it. They can read it for free. Otherwise, you might have to photocopy some things for them. Then I think it's a question of the texts getting shorter. So you might do short stories, poems, novel excerpts, scenes from Shakespeare. Again, they like Dubliners. You might do single stories. It got cut off. That's Evelyn. A few stories into the collection. Writing activities explaining or describing the story. So you might be working at the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. That's fine. Again, it's like politics, the art of the doable. Low-level fluency, or just low-level motivation. It might be a matter of your class structure. You only meet them once a week. You only have classes that last a month. Students are dropping in and out. They're students in a totally different discipline. They just don't give a rat's behind. When you have these issues, what you might do is go down to stories, poems, texts that you can read in that class period. It might help if the students are hearing it together. They're exercising a different part of their brain because they're hearing it and reading it. Again, that might be a doable opportunity to bring literature into your classroom at the lower levels. You read it in class, you discuss it in class. Simple writing activities about the story, even creative writing. Poems. Poems work great. Poems work great. I do poems in my Shakespeare class and in my Survey British class. I mean, we do Shakespeare. They like Shakespeare. We can talk about that. It's an emotional poem. I mean, they go home and then they read it to their girlfriends and show off. So the Shakespeare works well in a high-level class. I even have them, I mean, we do the boring parts. We analyze Petrarchan, Elizabethan, sonnet formats, iambic, trochaic, meter, rhyming couplets, rhyme scheme, sestet, octet. We do that stuff in class, and they actually don't fall asleep. But what I find that's really fun is then I have them write their own poems. They do this in groups. And again, they did much better than I expected. They like working within structures. The engineering students did quite well. They're used to thinking in structures. And they wrote quite good poems. Middle level, you work with easier poems. Okay, do not go gentle into that good night. Yeah. It's an Interstellar reference. They read the poem in the movie, so they like that poem and it's romantic. But I did that poem in a slightly, I did it in a second year class. They liked it, and again, we could interpret the poem, and then I had them write their own poems in groups. And we're not dealing with such strict forms as you do with the Shakespearean sonnet, but I still had to talk about rhyme schemes. They did well. Again, impressive work they did with the poems. I was pleased. Low level, picture poems. Okay, well, here's E.E. Cummings. Be careful typing this into a search engine in your class. But E.E. Cummings goes over well. They like the picture arranged poems. because it's language independent. They can understand some of the concepts because they're visual, even if their English is not that strong. A leaf falls loneliness. So le-if, or le-onliness, with a leaf falling, moving back and forth in time at different speeds. There's different levels of interpretation in that visual poem. The students like it. They can talk about it, and they can write their own picture poems. A couple examples here. From Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. Here's a poem about a mouse's tail. Wonderful little poem. 1930s, a poem about Coca-Cola. Robert Hollander. So he writes this wonderful picture poem about Coca-Cola. These poems go back quite a ways. There's one by Herbert from the 1630s.
Easter Wings.
Easter Wings, thank you. And who else? There's a few from the Victorian era. It became popular again in Victorian era. So there's this works. 1968, okay, not the 30s. Stuff like this. So, we're doing fine actually. It's 40 after. So, conclusions. Well, I think it's culturally interesting, and it provides an alternative to other forms of content. I'm trying to think of a beautiful, poetic, uplifting, empowering way of ending my presentation. I don't really go for the teaching as journey paradigm business. I know that a lot of people like it and it works for them. I have friends who do. That's fine. It just doesn't work for me. To me, considering everything as a journey cheapens the word. I wonder how the rock band Journey thinks about this. Having said that, I'm going to give you the cliche of cliches. I do learn from my students. I do learn from my students. When they do this stuff, one of the criticisms of literary interpretation is that there's no right answer. So, is Hamlet cuckoo? Is he not? You can come up with arguments either way. And again, some people criticize literature on that basis. I think in a classroom that's an asset, because I think the students come up with interesting new ideas, they come up with new reasons, and I think when they're invested in having an argument of their own, their motivation goes up. They feel like they're more a part of the literature, or at least more a part of the class. So I think it's valuable. And that's all I have to say, and thank you for listening.